Dr. Rodriguez stood and walked to the viewing port that showed the stars beyond the research station. Commander Velos presented these findings to the Galactic Council in a closed session. The debate lasted for 3 days, but the conclusion was unanimous. Humans could never be allowed to participate in galactic military conflicts because their involvement would inevitably escalate any war beyond all control. But there was one more finding that sealed the decision. Ares didn't just predict how humans would fight. It predicted how they would learn from any galactic conflict. The simulation showed that even a single military engagement would teach humans enough about alien technologies and tactics to make them exponentially more dangerous in future encounters. The Council realized that any war involving humans would be the last limited conflict in galactic history. After that, warfare would become a matter of species survival for everyone involved. Lumièce's crystal body dimmed with understanding. So the Omega classification wasn't created to protect other species from human aggression. Exactly, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed. It was created to protect the galaxy from human ingenuity under wartime conditions. The Council understood that humans don't lose wars. They either win completely or die trying. And if they ever perceived the galaxy as threatening their survival, Ares predicted they would find ways to make that perception reality. As Cathara and Lumièce prepared to leave Research Station Omega-7, Dr. Rodriguez offered them a final warning. You've learned a lot about human military potential, but remember that humans themselves don't fully understand what they're capable of under extreme circumstances. They've never faced a true existential threat as a united species. Let's hope they never have to. The journey back to Zephyrian Academy felt different this time. Cathara stared out the viewport at the passing stars, her mind processing everything they had learned over the past month. The fragments of information from Admiral Corvash, Elder Thane, and Dr. Rodriguez were forming a picture that was both fascinating and terrifying. But she knew there were still missing pieces to this puzzle. We have testimonies from witnesses and evidence from simulations, she said to Lumièce as they sat in their cabin. But we still don't know the complete official story. Someone in the current Galactic Council must know the full truth. Lumièce pulsed thoughtfully. The file we found mentioned recent access to the classified records. Someone high up in the Council hierarchy has been reviewing this information. Maybe it's time to approach them directly. That's incredibly risky. If we're wrong about their willingness to talk, we could be expelled or worse. But if we're right, we might finally get the complete truth about human military prohibition. After much debate, they decided to contact Ambassador Nicole Grant, the current human representative to the Galactic Council. If anyone would be willing to discuss the true reasons behind human military restrictions, it would be someone from the species in question. They sent a formal request through diplomatic channels, explaining their academic research and their discoveries so far. To their surprise, Ambassador Grant responded within days, inviting them to meet her at the Council chambers on Galactic Prime. Even more surprising, she suggested they also meet with Supreme Chancellor Kethmore, the current head of the Galactic Council. The message was brief but intriguing. Your research has uncovered information that the Council believes should be shared with the academic community. We are prepared to provide you with the complete truth. Galactic Prime was the most impressive structure Cathara had ever seen. The massive space station served as the political center of galactic civilization, housing representatives from thousands of species in a structure that could be seen from several star systems away. The Council chambers themselves were designed to accommodate every known form of life, with environmental controls that could shift to match the needs of different species within seconds. Ambassador Grant met them in a private conference room adjacent to the main Council chamber. She was a middle-aged human woman with silver hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to carry the weight of difficult knowledge. Beside her sat Supreme Chancellor Kethmore, an ancient being from the long-lived Eternari species who had guided the Council for over 3 centuries. Students from Zephyrian Academy, Ambassador Grant said with a slight smile, we've been monitoring your research with great interest. Admiral Corvash, Elder Thane, and Dr. Rodriguez have all reported your visits to us. Cathara felt a moment of panic. Are we in trouble? We were only seeking information for academic purposes. On the contrary, Supreme Chancellor Kethmore said in his deep, melodious voice, we believe it's time for this information to be shared more widely. The classified period for the Terra incident files expires in 5 years anyway. and recent galactic developments have made us reconsider the wisdom of keeping this knowledge completely secret. Ambassador Grant leaned forward. You want to know why humans are prohibited from galactic warfare? Very well. But first you must understand that everything you've learned so far is true but incomplete. The real reason for the Omega classification is far more complex than what you've discovered. The Kepler incident, Elder Thane's investigation, and the Ares simulation all contributed to our understanding of human military potential, Supreme Chancellor Kethmore continued. But the final decision wasn't made based on fear of human aggression. It was made based on fear of human unity. Lumiez pulsed a confused orange. Unity? Let me explain, Ambassador Grant said. Every species in the galaxy has internal conflicts. Political factions, religious differences, territorial disputes. These divisions limit their ability to respond to external threats in a coordinated manner. The Council has always been able to negotiate with different factions within each species, preventing any single civilization from becoming too powerful. Humans are different. When faced with an external threat to our species, we do something that no other civilization has ever achieved. We actually unite. The ambassador activated a holographic display showing human historical data. The Ares simulation didn't just predict human military tactics, it predicted human political behavior under stress. Every historical analysis showed the same pattern. When humans perceive a threat to their species' survival, all internal conflicts stop. Nations that have been enemies for centuries will suddenly become allies. Religious groups that have fought holy wars will work together. Political ideologies that seem incompatible will find common ground. Every human becomes part of a single unified civilization dedicated to species survival. Supreme Chancellor Kethmore added grimly, "This level of unity is unprecedented in galactic history. Most species can only achieve partial coordination even under the most extreme circumstances, but humans have demonstrated the ability to transform their entire civilization into a single military entity when threatened." Kethara was beginning to understand the implications. So the prohibition isn't just about human fighting ability, it's about their ability to work together. Exactly, Ambassador Grant confirmed. A unified human civilization would be unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. Our industrial capacity, technological innovation, and strategic thinking would be focused on a single goal, with no internal opposition or resource waste. But there's more, Supreme Chancellor Kethmore continued. The Council discovered that human unity doesn't end when the immediate threat is eliminated. Historical analysis shows that humans maintain their unified state until they are completely certain that the threat can never arise again. The holographic display changed to show projections from the Ares simulation. The computer modeling predicted that if humans ever unified against a galactic threat, they would not stop fighting until they had eliminated not just the immediate danger, but every potential future source of such threats. Ambassador Grant's expression grew serious. The simulation showed humans developing technologies and strategies designed to prevent any alien civilization from ever threatening humanity again. They would not negotiate territories or resources. They would negotiate the fundamental power structure of galactic civilization. In essence, a united humanity would either be destroyed completely or would become the dominant power in the galaxy. There would be no middle ground. Kethara felt a chill as she realized the full implications. So the Omega classification exists to prevent humans from ever having a reason to unite against external threats. Precisely, Supreme Chancellor Kethmore confirmed. By keeping humans out of galactic conflicts, we ensure they never perceive the galaxy as a unified threat to their species. Their internal political divisions remain intact, preventing them from achieving the terrifying unity they're capable of under stress. But what if they discover this truth? Lumiez asked. What if humans realize they're being deliberately excluded from galactic military affairs? Ambassador Grant exchanged a meaningful look with the Supreme Chancellor before answering. That's why I'm here. I'm not just the human representative to the Galactic Council. I'm part of a group of humans who know the complete truth about our military prohibition. There are humans who understand why the Omega classification exists. A small group, yes. We call ourselves the Guardians. We work to ensure that humanity remains peacefully integrated into galactic society, without ever learning the real reason we're excluded from military conflicts. Supreme Chancellor Kethmore leaned forward. You see, the prohibition only works if humans believe it's for their own protection or because they're not militarily capable enough to participate. If they ever realize that other species fear human unity, that knowledge itself could trigger the very response we're trying to prevent. Humans who learned they were considered too dangerous for galactic warfare might begin to see the galaxy as a threat that needs to be controlled or eliminated. Ambassador Grant added, the knowledge could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we maintain the fiction that humans are prohibited from military service for their own safety, or because they lack the necessary experience. Meanwhile, we work behind the scenes to ensure that human civilization never faces a crisis that would trigger species-wide unity. Cathara sat in stunned silence, trying to process the full implications of what she was learning. But why are you telling us this? Doesn't sharing this information with non-humans create the same risk? Because, Supreme Chancellor Kethmore said gravely, recent developments in several outer rim sectors suggest that maintaining this secret may no longer be possible. There are factions within the galaxy who want to test human military capabilities, believing the prohibition is unjustified. If those factions succeed in provoking a conflict that humans perceive as species-threatening, the Omega classification will become irrelevant. We believe it's better to share this knowledge with trusted academics who can help educate the galactic community about the importance of maintaining peaceful relations with humanity. Ambassador, Grant stood and walked to the viewing port that showed the vast expanse of space beyond the station. You wanted to know why humans are prohibited from galactic warfare. Now you know the complete truth. We're not kept out of your wars to protect us. We're kept out to protect the galaxy from what we become when we're truly threatened. Humans don't fight wars the way other species do. We fight extinctions, and if we ever decide that galactic civilization is a threat to human survival, we'll do what we've always done when faced with existential danger. We'll make sure we're the only ones left standing. As Cathara and Lumias prepared to leave Galactic Prime, Supreme Chancellor Kethmore offered them one final thought. Knowledge is a burden as much as a gift. You now understand one of the most carefully guarded secrets in galactic history. Use this knowledge wisely, because the peace of countless civilizations may depend on ensuring that the sleeping giant of human unity never wakens. The two students left the council chambers with a new understanding of their place in the galaxy and the terrible responsibility that came with forbidden knowledge. They had sought the truth about human military prohibition and found something far more profound. The delicate balance that kept galactic civilization from discovering what humanity was truly capable of when united against a common threat. Elder Thane's revelation about human warfare had shaken both students deeply, but it also raised new questions. As their transport ship carried them away from the Cathari monastery, Cathara found herself wondering how the Galactic Council had made their final decision about human military prohibition. The evidence from Admiral Corvash and Elder Thane was disturbing, but surely the Council would have wanted more concrete proof before making such an unprecedented ruling. There has to be more, she said to Lumias as they reviewed their notes in their shared cabin. The Council doesn't make decisions based on interviews and historical analysis alone. They would have wanted hard data about human military capabilities. Lumias pulsed thoughtfully. You're right. Council protocols require quantifiable evidence for all military classifications. They would have run simulations, battle projections, tactical analyses. Then we need to find whoever conducted those simulations. Their search led them to Dr. Carl Rodriguez, a human civilian who worked as a tactical consultant for various galactic organizations. According to public records, he had been involved in several classified projects for the Galactic Council during the years following the Terra incident. Currently, he was stationed on Research Station Omega-7, studying asteroid mining techniques in the Vega system. Getting permission to visit a human civilian was much easier than accessing military personnel, and within a week they found themselves aboard another transport ship heading for the Vega system. Dr. Rodriguez had agreed to meet with them, though his response message had seemed oddly nervous for what should have been a routine academic interview. Research Station Omega-7 was a typical civilian facility, focusing on industrial research rather than military applications. Dr. Rodriguez met them in one of the station's conference rooms, and Cathara immediately noticed that he seemed uncomfortable. despite the friendly nature of their request. He was a middle-aged human with graying hair and tired eyes that suggested he had seen things that still troubled him. When they explained their research into the Terra incident and human military classification, his expression grew even more worried. "I was wondering when someone would eventually come asking about the Omega Project," he said quietly. "I've been dreading this conversation for 25 years. "The Omega Project?" Lumius asked. "That's what we called it internally. The Galactic Council wanted to understand exactly how humans would perform in theoretical galactic conflicts, so they commissioned the most advanced military simulation ever created. They brought me in as the human cultural consultant." Dr. Rodriguez stood and activated a privacy shield around their meeting area. "What I'm about to tell you is still classified at the highest levels, but I think the galaxy deserves to know the truth about what we discovered." He pulled up a holographic display showing complex mathematical models and battle scenarios. The simulation was called ARES, Advanced Recursive Engagement System. It was designed by the brightest minds from every major civilization in the galaxy. The computing power required was enormous. They had to link quantum processors from 12 different star systems. The goal was simple: input every known military unit, technology, and tactical doctrine from every galactic civilization, then model how humans would perform in various conflict scenarios. They gave Ares access to all of human military history, our cultural databases, psychological profiles, everything. Cathara leaned forward eagerly. "What did the simulation show?" Dr. Rodriguez's expression grew grim. "That's where things went horribly wrong. The simulations didn't just predict human military performance. They showed us changing the fundamental nature of warfare itself." He gestured to the holographic display, which began showing animated battle scenarios. "In the first test scenarios, we modeled conventional conflicts between humans and other galactic powers. Standard fleet engagements, planetary invasions, resource disputes, the kind of limited wars that were common throughout the galaxy. Ares predicted that humans would perform adequately in most scenarios, with some tactical innovations that other species might find interesting. But then we started modeling larger conflicts, and the results became disturbing." The display showed increasingly complex battle patterns as Dr. Rodriguez continued. "When Ares modeled scenarios where human survival was threatened, the simulation results became unlike anything we had ever seen. Humans didn't just adapt their tactics, they revolutionized them. In one scenario, human forces were losing a conventional space battle against superior Centaurian fleets. Instead of retreating or surrendering, the simulated humans began targeting civilian infrastructure, supply lines, and even attempted to crash damaged ships into enemy planets. The AI calculated that humans would rather destroy entire systems than accept defeat." Lumius pulsed a shocked red. "They would attack civilian targets?" That's what terrified the simulation team. Ayres predicted that humans would treat any existential threat as justification for total warfare. No targets would be considered off-limits if human survival was at stake. Dr. Rodriguez changed the display to show even more complex scenarios. But the real nightmare came when we modeled human technological adaptation under wartime pressure. Ares had access to human innovation patterns from their historical conflicts, and it used that data to predict how they would develop new weapons and tactics. The simulation showed humans creating weapons that no other species had ever conceived of. They turned peaceful technologies into instruments of destruction in ways that violated every convention of civilized warfare. Mining lasers became planet crackers. Terraforming equipment became biological weapons. Even their entertainment systems were converted into psychological warfare tools. Commander Velos from the Centaurian Strategic Command was overseeing the project. After the first major simulation runs, he called an emergency meeting with the full council. He told them that Ares was predicting warfare scenarios that were beyond anything in galactic experience. Cathara felt a chill run down her spine. How bad were the predictions? In every scenario where humans perceived an existential threat to their species, Ares predicted they would fight with a combination of tactical innovation, strategic ruthlessness, and technological adaptation that would fundamentally change galactic civilization, win or lose. The galaxy would never be the same after a war involving humans. Dr. Rodriguez sat down heavily, looking older than his years. But the final simulation was what convinced the Council to implement the Omega classification. We ran a scenario where humans were facing complete extinction, their homeworld destroyed, their colonies under attack. their entire species threatened with annihilation. Instead of modeling defeat and extinction, Ayres predicted something that shocked everyone involved in the project. It calculated that humans would unite in ways that no other species had ever achieved. Every faction, nation, and colony would put aside their differences to face the external threat. The simulation showed humans developing weapons designed specifically to fight aliens, kinetic bombardments that could destroy entire fleets, biological agents tailored to alien physiologies, even plans to weaponize their own star system. Ayres calculated that humans would turn their entire civilization into a weapon of revenge. The holographic display now showed terrifying projections of human retaliation scenarios. Cathura watched in fascination and horror as the simulation demonstrated humans converting civilian infrastructure into military assets, turning merchant vessels into suicide bombers, and developing technologies that could sterilize entire worlds. The most disturbing prediction was that humans would not stop fighting even if they achieved victory. Ayres calculated that once humans perceived other species as existential threats, they would continue fighting until every potential future threat was eliminated. They would not negotiate, compromise, or show mercy to any civilization that had threatened human survival. Admiral Corvash's datapad contained more information than Cathara and Lumias had expected. As they read through the classified report during their journey back to the Academy, they discovered references to a deeper investigation that had taken place after the Kepler incident. The report mentioned Elder Thane, a Cathari warrior philosopher, who had been assigned to study human combat behavior for the Galactic Council. The Cathari are the most respected warriors in the galaxy, Lumias observed as their transport ship moved through hyperspace. If anyone could understand human military thinking, it would be them. Cathara nodded while scrolling through the data. According to this report, Elder Thane spent 6 months on Earth studying human military history and culture. But his final recommendation was that humans should never be allowed to participate in galactic conflicts under any circumstances. That seems extreme, even for the Cathari. They usually respect warrior cultures. That's what makes this so interesting. The Cathari have never recommended a complete military ban for any species before. Finding Elder Thane proved easier than expected. The ancient Cathari warrior lived in a monastery on the remote moon of Kestalar, where he taught young Cathari about combat philosophy and military ethics. Getting permission to visit him required a formal request through the Cathari embassy, but their status as academy students researching military history opened the necessary doors. The monastery was a stark contrast to the flowing architecture of Centauri Prime, built into the side of a massive cliff. It consisted of simple stone chambers connected by narrow walkways. The Cathari believed that warriors should live without luxury to keep their minds focused on important matters. Elder Thane met them in a meditation garden overlooking the moon's barren landscape. He was enormous even by Cathari standards, standing nearly 3 meters tall with the characteristic gray skin and bone ridges that marked his species. His forearms were covered in ritual scars that told the story of countless battles fought across the galaxy. So, he said in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder, more students come seeking knowledge about the humans. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. Cathara bowed respectfully. Elder Thane, we're trying to understand why humans received the Omega classification. Admiral Corvash told us about the Kepler incident, but we know there must be more to the story. The ancient warrior gestured for them to sit on the stone benches arranged around the garden. Indeed, there is more, much more. The Kepler incident was merely the first glimpse of what humans truly are. The real investigation came later, when the Council asked my people to evaluate human military potential. Elder Thane walked to the edge of the garden and stared out at the rocky landscape below. We Cathari have studied warfare for 10,000 years. We understand combat in all its forms: individual duels, small unit tactics, fleet engagements, planetary sieges. We thought we had seen every possible approach to organized violence. But humans were different? Humans were impossible, Elder Thane replied firmly. Every principle of warfare that we considered universal, humans violated. Every assumption about military behavior that we thought was absolute, humans proved wrong. The elder turned back to face them, his dark eyes reflecting decades of combat experience. Let me explain what we discovered. All known species fight for logical reasons: territory, resources, mates, dominance. These motivations make warfare predictable. You can calculate acceptable losses, determine strategic objectives, negotiate settlements. Humans fight for ideas. Lumius pulsed a confused orange. Ideas? Concepts that exist only in their minds. Freedom, justice, honor, love. Abstract notions that cannot be measured or divided or traded. This makes human warfare fundamentally different from anything else in the galaxy. Elder Thane began pacing around the garden as he spoke, his massive form moving with surprising grace. We spent months interviewing human military leaders, studying their historical battles, trying to understand their strategic thinking. What we learned terrified us. During our investigation, we met with General Marcus Webb, one of their most experienced commanders. We asked him to explain human military doctrine, expecting to hear about troop formations, supply lines, technological advantages. Instead, he told us stories. Cathara leaned forward eagerly. What kind of stories? Stories about humans fighting impossible battles not to win, but to make a point. He told us about 300 Spartan warriors who chose to die rather than retreat, knowing their sacrifice would inspire their entire civilization. He described defenders of a place called the Alamo, who fought to the death when surrender would have been reasonable. He spoke of civilians in something called the Warsaw Ghetto who fought with handmade weapons against overwhelming military force. When we asked General Webb why humans would choose certain death over reasonable surrender, he said something that still haunts me. Elder Thane, we don't just fight to win. We fight to make sure that whoever beats us pays such a terrible price that they'll think twice before fighting the next human they meet. Lumius's crystal body flickered nervously. That sounds like a form of psychological warfare. It is far worse than psychological warfare, Elder Thane replied grimly. It is warfare that includes the entire species as participants. When humans fight, they are not just defending territory or resources. They are defending the right of humans to exist as free beings. The elder stopped pacing and sat heavily on one of the stone benches. We Cathari respect courage and honor in combat. But human warfare operates on principles that we found deeply disturbing. They have something they call acceptable loss ratios that include the complete destruction of their own forces if it achieves strategic objectives. General Webb showed us battle plans where human commanders expected 90% casualties but proceeded anyway because the mission was considered essential. He showed us records of human soldiers who volunteered for operations that were certain death, not because they wanted to die, but because they believed their sacrifice would protect other humans. Cathara felt a chill despite the warm artificial atmosphere in the garden. How did the Cathari military analysts react to this information? They were horrified. Our greatest warriors, beings who have faced death in 1,000 battles, were disturbed by human military thinking. We realized that humans don't understand limited warfare. To them, every conflict is total war. Elder Thane stood and walked to a weapons display that held traditional Cathari combat tools. He picked up an ancient sword and examined its edge. But the most disturbing discovery came when we analyzed human tactical adaptability. In every historical conflict we studied, humans demonstrated an ability to learn and evolve their fighting methods faster than their enemies could adapt. They study their defeats more carefully than their victories. Every loss becomes a lesson that makes them more dangerous in the next engagement. They share these lessons across their entire species, so that no human army ever makes the same mistake twice. This is why we recommended the Omega classification, not because humans are the strongest warriors, or because they have the best weapons, but because they approach warfare as an existential struggle for the survival of their entire species. The ancient warrior returned the sword to its place and faced his visitors directly. Every other species in the galaxy fights wars. Humans fight extinctions. They treat every battle, no matter how small, as if the future of humanity depends on the outcome. When we presented our findings to the Galactic Council, there was immediate debate about what to do with this information. Some council members wanted to recruit humans as military allies, believing their unique approach to warfare could be valuable. But the wise members understood the terrible truth. If humans ever decided that galactic society was a threat to their freedom or survival, they would not negotiate or compromise. They would fight until either they were completely destroyed or every potential threat to humanity was eliminated. Cathara's voice was barely a whisper. And you believe they could actually win such a war? Elder Thane was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the barren moon landscape. I have studied warfare for over 2 centuries. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have witnessed the destruction of entire star systems. And after 6 months of studying human military culture, I reached a conclusion that I have shared with no one until today. If humans ever unite against a common external threat, if they ever decide that the galaxy is trying to destroy them, they will not just fight back. They will fight to ensure that such a threat can never arise again. And based on everything I learned about human ingenuity, determination, and willingness to sacrifice, I believe they would succeed. The Elder's words hung in the air like a death sentence. Cathara and Lumias sat in stunned silence, trying to process the implications of what they had learned. The Omega classification exists to protect the galaxy from itself, Elder Thane concluded. By keeping humans out of our conflicts, we ensure they never have a reason to see us as enemies. Because if they ever do, we will discover that there are fates worse than defeat. As they prepared to leave the monastery, Elder Thane offered them one final piece of advice. You seek knowledge about humans, young scholars, but knowledge comes with responsibility. Admiral Corvash turned back to face his guests. That's when we realized the horrible truth. Humans don't just fight to win battles. They fight to send a message. Every conflict, no matter how small, is treated as a war for survival. The Galactic Council spent months debating what to do with this information. Some wanted to recruit humans as military allies. Others wanted to quarantine their entire species. In the end, we chose a middle path. We allowed humans into galactic society, but prohibited them from any military involvement. But why? Cathara asked. If they were such effective fighters, wouldn't they make valuable allies? The Admiral's expression grew grim. Because we realized that if humans ever perceived the galaxy as a threat to their species, they wouldn't just fight back. They would fight to eliminate every possible future threat, and based on what we saw at Kepler, they would probably succeed. He walked over to another display case and pulled out a data pad. This contains the full report I filed after the incident. It's been classified for 30 years, but I think you deserve to know the truth. Read it and you'll understand why the Omega classification exists. As Cathara took the data pad, Admiral Corvash added quietly, just remember, some knowledge comes with a price. Once you understand what humans are really capable of, you'll never look at them the same way again. 3 days after their midnight adventure in the archives, Cathara still couldn't get the mysterious file out of her mind. She sat in the Academy's main cafeteria, picking at her protein cubes while watching the other students eat their various species-appropriate meals. Lumi S floated beside her, absorbing energy directly from the light fixtures above their table. I've been thinking about that file, Cathara said quietly, making sure no other students could overhear. The Kepler mining station incident happened 30 years ago, but someone accessed the file recently. What if we could find someone who was there when it happened? Lumias pulsed a curious yellow. You mean find actual witnesses? That would be extremely difficult. Military personnel from that era would be retired or dead by now. Not necessarily. Some species live much longer than others, and there might be records we can access legally. Cathara pulled out her student data pad and began searching the Academy's public databases. Look here. The Kepler system is in Centaurian space. If there was some kind of incident there, Centaurian military would have been involved. After an hour of searching, they found what they were looking for. Admiral Corvash, a retired Centaurian fleet commander, was living on Centauri Prime. His military record showed he had served in the Kepler sector during the exact time period mentioned in the classified file. He's still alive, Lumias noted, reading over Cathara's shoulder. Centaurians can live up to 200 years and he's only 150. And look at this, Cathara pointed to another entry. He gives lectures at the Centaurian War College about unusual combat scenarios. Maybe he'll talk to us if we approach him as students doing research. Getting permission to travel to Centauri, Prime took another week of paperwork and academic justifications. But finally they found themselves standing outside Admiral Corvash's modest home in the capital city. The building was typical Centaurian architecture, all smooth curves and flowing lines that seemed to grow from the ground rather than being built on top of it. The admiral who answered the door was ancient, even by Centaurian standards. His blue-gray skin was marked with the ritual scars that showed his military rank, and his forearms moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent decades commanding starships. His large black eyes studied them with obvious suspicion, Students from Zephyrian Academy, he said in perfect standard Galactic. What could you possibly want with an old soldier like me? Cathara had prepared for this moment. Admiral, we're researching historical military incidents for our thesis project. We're particularly interested in unusual first contact situations and how they shaped galactic policy. The Admiral's expression didn't change, but Cathara noticed his secondary arms had begun the slight trembling that indicated stress in older Centaurians. First contact situations, I see. And what specific incident brought you to my door? The Terra incident, Lumia said simply. For a long moment, Admiral Corvash stood frozen in his doorway. Then he stepped back and gestured for them to enter. I suppose it was inevitable that someone would eventually come asking about that. Come in then, but understand that what I'm about to tell you is not in any official records for very good reasons. The Admiral's home was filled with military memorabilia from his long career. Model starships floated in display cases, and the walls were covered with commendations and battle ribbons. He led them to a sitting area and activated a privacy shield before speaking again. You want to know about the Terra incident? Very well. But first, you must understand that everything you think you know about human first contact is a lie. The history books say humans stumbled into galactic society as peaceful explorers who were discovered by our survey teams. That's completely false. Cathara and Lumius exchanged glances. This was already more than they had hoped for. The truth is that humans were discovered when one of their mining ships was attacked by Zerathi pirates near the Kepler system. I was a young fleet captain then, commanding a patrol cruiser in that sector. When we received the distress signal, we expected to find the usual aftermath of a pirate raid. Dead crew? Stolen cargo? Maybe a few survivors hiding in the ship's safe rooms? Admiral Corvash stood and walked to one of his display cases, staring at a model of his old command ship. What we found instead changed everything we thought we knew about warfare. The human ship was called the New Denver. It was a simple mining vessel. Nothing special about its design or armament. The pirates had attacked with 3 ships, which should have been more than enough to overwhelm a single mining craft. But when we arrived, 2 of the pirate ships were destroyed, and the 3rd was drifting dead in space. Lumi S's crystal body flickered with amazement. A mining ship defeated 3 pirate vessels? That's what we thought at first. But when we boarded the human ship, we realized the situation was far more complex. The humans hadn't just fought off the pirates. They had turned their entire ship into a weapon. The Admiral returned to his seat, his expression growing distant as he remembered. The human crew was led by a captain named Ryan Cooper and an engineer named Megan Torres. When the pirates attacked, they didn't try to run or surrender like any sensible crew would. Instead, they began improvising weapons from their mining equipment. They used industrial lasers as point defense systems. They turned their ore processing explosives into missiles. They even modified their mining drones to ram into the pirate ships. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. Cathara leaned forward eagerly. What was? The most disturbing part was how they thought. We interviewed the surviving pirates after we captured them, and they were traumatized. They kept talking about how the humans fought like they were insane. One pirate said the humans acted like they were willing to destroy their own ship as long as they could take the attackers with them. Admiral Corvash paused, his forearms folding across his chest. But the real shock came when the pirates boarded the human ship. You have to understand, boarding actions follow certain rules across all known species. The defenders retreat to secure positions. There's usually some negotiation. Surrender is always an option. The humans didn't follow any of those rules. When the pirates breached their hull, the humans started using the ship's own systems against them. They vented atmosphere from sections where pirates were located, even though some of their own crew were in those areas too. They used the artificial gravity as a weapon, suddenly increasing it to crush the boarders. They even released toxic mining chemicals into the air recycling system. Lumias pulsed a shocked red. They were willing to poison their own ship? That's exactly what disturbed us the most. The humans seemed to have no concept of acceptable losses or proportional response. They fought like every single battle was a fight to the death of their entire species. The Admiral stood again and walked to his window, looking out at the peaceful Centaurian cityscape. Captain Cooper and Engineer Torres survived the battle, along with most of their crew. When we rescued them, they weren't celebrating their victory. They were already planning how to modify other human ships to fight more effectively. Cooper told me something that still gives me nightmares. He said, "Admiral, we appreciate the rescue, but next time something like this happens, we'll be ready. We're going to make sure that anyone who attacks human ships will regret it for the rest of their very short lives." Cathara felt a chill run down her spine. What happened next? We brought the humans back to Centauri Prime for debriefing. The military analysts were fascinated by their tactical innovations, but also deeply disturbed. The humans had developed combat techniques in a matter of hours that our military colleges had never even considered. The real problem came when we tried to understand their motivation. Every other species fights for logical reasons: territory, resources, dominance. But when we asked the humans why they had fought so desperately instead of surrendering, they looked at us like we were crazy. Engineer Torres said, "Surrender? To pirates who were going to kill us anyway? We fought because that's what you do when someone tries to hurt your people. You make them pay such a high price that they'll think twice before trying it again." The massive crystal dome of Zephyrian Academy floated silently in the void, its transparent walls offering a perfect view of the gas giant below and the countless stars beyond. Inside the grand lecture hall, dozens of alien students sat in their species-specific seats, listening to Professor Veltar drone on about the galactic warfare accords. Cathara Zinn shifted uncomfortably in her temperature-controlled chair, her reptilian scales catching the artificial sunlight that streamed through the dome. As a Vorthak, she was naturally curious, and today's lesson about galactic military regulations was making her more restless than usual. The ancient Grimaldi professor stood at the front of the class, his forearms gesturing at the holographic display that showed various species classifications. "As we can see here," Professor Veltar said in his whistling voice, "each species is categorized based on their military capabilities and threat assessment. The Centaurians are classified as Category Alpha due to their advanced fleet tactics. The Cathari warriors earn a Category Beta rating for their individual combat prowess. The hive minds receive Category Gamma because of their coordinated assault patterns." Cathara raised her clawed hand. "Professor, what about the humans? I see they're listed as Category Omega, but that classification isn't explained in our textbooks." The professor's pale blue skin immediately darkened to a nervous purple shade. His secondary arms began twitching, a clear sign of distress among his people. Well, the human classification it's a special case. Very technical. Not really relevant to this course, but Cathara wasn't satisfied. She had studied every species in the galaxy during her 3 years at the Academy, and humans had always puzzled her. They were a relatively young species, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. Their technology was decent but not exceptional. Their military seemed standard for a developing civilization. Yet somehow they were the only species with an Omega classification. "But Professor," she pressed, "if humans are such a young species, why do they have a unique category? Shouldn't they be classified with other developing civilizations?" Professor Veltar's twitching became more pronounced. Several other students were now paying attention, including Lumi-S, the crystalline Etherian who sat beside Cathara. Lumius could process information at incredible speeds, and her crystal body was already beginning to pulse with the soft blue light that indicated intense thought. "The classification system is complex," Professor Veltar said quickly, clearly wanting to change the subject. "Human involvement in galactic affairs is limited to civilian sectors. They excel at mining, agriculture, and scientific research. Now let's move on to the trade regulations between the Outer Rim territories." Cathara exchanged a look with Lumi-S. The Etherian's body flashed once, and what Cathara had learned was equivalent to a raised eyebrow. Something was definitely being hidden from them. After class, the two friends walked through the Academy's crystal corridors toward the student quarters. Other alien students moved past them in small groups, their various languages creating a constant background chatter. Cathara's mind kept returning to Professor Veltar's reaction. "Did you see how nervous he got?" Cathara asked as they entered the lift that would take them to their dormitory level. Lumi-S's crystal body pulsed thoughtfully. His stress indicators were off the charts. Heart rate increased by 40%. Skin color shift indicated extreme anxiety. Voice pattern showed clear deception markers. "Exactly. And did you notice he said human involvement is limited to civilian sectors? That implies there was a time when it wasn't limited." The lift doors opened and they stepped into the residential corridor. Each door was customized for different species' needs, from the high-temperature chambers needed by the volcanic Pirathi to the low-gravity rooms preferred by the gaseous nebulari. "What do you think we should do?" Lumius asked as they reached Cathara's room. Cathara's reptilian eyes gleamed with determination. "I think we need to visit the archives tonight. There has to be more information about this Omega classification somewhere in the restricted files." Lumius's crystal body dimmed slightly with concern. The restricted archives require special clearance. If we're caught accessing classified information, we could be expelled. "But you can interface with quantum storage systems better than any other species," Cathara pointed out. "Your people designed half the security protocols in this galaxy. If anyone can get us in without being detected, it's you." The Etherian considered this for a long moment, her body cycling through various colors as she processed the possibilities. Finally, she pulsed a soft green, which Cathara knew meant agreement. "Very well, but we do this carefully. Meet me at the Central Archive Hub at midnight. Most of the faculty will be in their rest cycles by then." The Academy's archive section was located deep within the station's core, surrounded by layers of security barriers and quantum encryption fields. At midnight, the corridors were empty except for the occasional maintenance droid, gliding silently through the halls. Cathara found Lumius already waiting by the main archive entrance, her crystal body barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. The Etherian had extended several fiber-optic tendrils from her core, and they were already probing the security panel beside the massive vault door. "The outer security is standard," Lumius whispered, her voice taking on the tinkling quality it had when she was concentrating. "But there are deeper layers. This information is more heavily protected than I expected. Can you get through it?" "Eventually. But Cathara, this level of security is usually reserved for planet-killer weapon designs or extinct civilization data. Whatever information they're hiding about humans, someone really doesn't want it found." It took nearly an hour, but finally the massive archive door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, countless data crystals floated in organized patterns, each one containing terabytes of historical information. Lumius guided them through the maze of floating data, her natural ability to interface with information systems allowing her to navigate the complex filing system. "Here," she said finally, stopping before a cluster of red-tinted crystals. "Anything related to military classifications should be in this section." Cathara watched as Lumius extended her tendrils toward the nearest crystal. For several minutes, the Etherian remained motionless as she processed the information. Then her body flashed bright red, the universal signal for alarm among her people. "What is it?" Cathara asked urgently. "I found it. A file labeled Terra Incident, classification level cosmic." "But Cathara, this is classified higher than anything I've ever seen." "The only reference I can access says, following the events at the Kepler mining station, the Galactic Council unanimously voted to classify humanity as permanently prohibited from military conflicts. See attached testimonies from survivors." "What about the testimonies?" Lumius's body dimmed with frustration. "Encrypted beyond our clearance level. But there's something else. The file creation date shows this happened 30 years ago, but the most recent access was just 3 months ago. Someone high up in the council hierarchy has been reviewing this information recently." Suddenly, the archive's lighting system activated, bathing the chamber in bright white light. Both students froze as they heard footsteps approaching from the corridor outside. "Quickly," Cathara whispered. "Can you copy what we found?" "Already done," Lumius replied, retracting her tendrils just as the footsteps reached the archive entrance. They managed to slip out through a maintenance shaft before the night security patrol arrived. But as they made their way back to their quarters, Cathara's mind was racing with questions. What had happened at the Kepler mining station? What had humans done that was so terrible it required permanent prohibition from military service? And why was someone in the council reviewing this information now, after 30 years of secrecy? As she finally reached her room and settled into her sleeping alcove, Cathara stared out at the stars beyond the Academy's crystal walls. Somewhere out there, among those countless points of light, humans were living their lives in blissful ignorance of whatever dark secret their species carried. But she was determined to find out the truth, no matter how dangerous that knowledge might be.